This show is brought to you by Sparkade, our ADHD game-based learning platform that helps kids transform challenges into opportunities. Parents and educators, join the waitlist at play.sparkade.app/waitlist and be among the first to experience Sparkade when we launch. That is play.sparkade.app. You've landed at Spark Launch, the guide star for embracing what it means to be neurodiverse. I'm Mike Cornell, joined by CEO of Spark Launch, Chaya. Here, we navigate mental health triumphs and tribulations from all across the spectrum, charting a course to the shared experiences that unite us, and discovering how to embody the unique strengths within neurodivergent and neurotypical alike, igniting your spark and launching it into a better tomorrow. Hello there, I'm Mike.
I'm Chaya.
And today's guest is Rupali Sharma, founder and director of the T.E.C Schools, a trailblazer in Montessori innovation, a trained architect who transitioned into education. Rupali established T.E.C, Think, Explore, Create, blending hands-on, authentic Montessori learning with the rigor and creativity of STEAM. She's dedicated her career to cultivating creative, independent thinkers and champions a holistic, future-focused approach to early education. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
Welcome, Rupali. I remember reading about your bio saying that you're an architect, right? So just tell us about how you transitioned from being an architect to creating a school. What was that journey that you took? What was that aha moment? And also, I'm very intrigued by the name of your school. So please share all that juicy details.
Sure. I'll start with the name of our school. Our school is called the T.E.C School, Think, Explore, Create. The idea is that throughout history, humans have used their ability to think. They have explored the tools around them and the environment around them to create the world that we live in. You look back in prehistoric times, in ancient civilizations, and in modern times, and today. We always have depended on our capability to think, analyze, synthesize, and then make the best that we can make from the things that we have. So if we give the children the ability to think, how to think, then give them the tools to explore and make them a part of the environment, then they're going to create a world, a beautiful world that we live in. So that's the thought behind the name. And then my journey as an architect, I was practicing as an architect in India, and we moved to the US. I had a son who was just 9 months old then. So when we came to the US, I was working with my company in India. And back then there were these floppy disks. So transferring data wasn't as easy. Soon I realized that it was better that I just focused on my son. And I started doing homeschooling at just with the community that we had in the apartment complex. So we started doing Montessori at home, and we found that the children were just absorbing the material so quickly, and then they wanted more. We would take them out for outings, and they would be so happy and exhausted after that. So that led me into following my child into his educational journey. So when he was in grade school, I noticed that they didn't really have enough science and creative aspects. Although he was in a Montessori school, that element was missing. So I started an after-school program called Imagination Unbound, and I started working on creative aspects like learning how to do theater or improv. They also started working on competitive competitions like Destination Imagination, where they had to think of a story and build some technical element to solve. So that's where my architecture training also came in handy, because I could think in those big idea terms and then also help the students come up with solutions. Actually, the solutions are theirs, but guiding them to what might the solution be. And so as my son grew older, I was still running Imagination Unbound. And when he went to college, I thought, okay, this is a good time for me to do something more robust, more formal. And I established the T.E.C schools in 2016, in June of 2016. So this year we are celebrating, we are coming up to our 10th year anniversary.
That is amazing. So when you, and the name, I just love the name. I'm sure Mike has a lot to say about that as well. And I'm thinking, like, the second I heard explore, I'm thinking that's where an ADHD brain thrives, when you make them explorer and you don't restrict them. And if you just look at a typical classroom, at least the classroom that I grew up in, they're not designed to explore. You're not allowed to wander around and just explore. And so just that name, and also, of course, think, when you give freedom, thinking, exploration, and creativity all need freedom to survive and thrive.
Yeah, I think freedom is the key word. All humans thrive with freedom, right? They need that freedom to think, freedom to act, freedom to create, freedom to make mistakes and not be judged for those mistakes. So in the Montessori system, Maria Montessori, I'll give a little background about Maria Montessori. She was a physician in the late 1800s in Italy, and she was tasked with working with students who were mentally disabled. And when she worked with the students, she found that they were really craving for activity, for something to touch, something to smell. It was all sensory. And so she started making materials for the students so that they could explore and they could make sense out of the world that they lived. So slowly she discovered that, okay, children like to build, they like to create, they like to work, they like to move. They are very different from adults. They like to be engaged in activity that is driven by their interest, not driven by the teacher's interest, but by their own interest. So she created materials in reading, writing, math, history, geography, science, art, music, so that children had these tools available for them that were on the shelf in the classroom that they could freely go to, take off the shelf, and work till they were completely satisfied with that material. And once they were satisfied, they were ready to have a little chit chat with their friends, engage in a conversation, then go back and take another material to work on. And so by making this philosophy or this pedagogy, she was able to tap into children's potential and not be restricted by what the adults thought that they could accomplish, but truly let the child be themselves, their true self. And I can't stress this enough, that freedom that children have in a Montessori classroom, it truly drives their learning. Whereas in many traditional schools, the learning is driven by the grades. Oh, you need to get an A, or you need to get 100%, whatever, it's an extrinsic motivator. It's not an intrinsic motivator. So yeah, freedom is a big part of the curriculum.
I just love that. And that's just perfect for a neurodivergent brain. But I also feel it has to be nurtured in the family as well. So the child goes to school and all that freedom is given in the school. And then the child comes home and that has to be encouraged. But the way the world is built, even talking about me as a mother back, when my son was little, I really don't know if I would have allowed for that freedom just because of fear. I was always living in fear as a parent. So there's nothing wrong. It's just that as a parent, you hear there are certain things, certain careers that you pursue will give a good life, right? As a parent, you're always, that is your intention for your child. And so that is very dependent on what families practice at home. And so I can imagine you must be seeing that connection or disconnection with families, because that's where a child truly survives. And I feel it's an ecosystem. Family, educators, and the child, all of them create this ecosystem together.
Yeah, in Montessori, we call it the triangle. There's the teacher, the student, the environment that they are in. And the environment is the school environment, also their home environment. And when there is a deep connection, when the parents and teachers are working in partnership, you truly see that the children thrive. And you talked about the disconnection. Yes, if the parents and teachers are not aligned, then the student will just they'll just get by, but they're not going to thrive because they inherently can understand the disconnect and the discord between the two environments. Now, in one environment, so in the Montessori environment, the children are permitted to go and explore whatever things they want to, but it's all within limits. So it's not a free for all. You can't do whatever you please. There are some ground rules. You cannot disrupt other students. You have to be respectful, purposefully engaged, not just making noise. So there are these rules. But once the children understand the framework, here are my boundaries, they can then explore within those boundaries. They have the freedom. In some families, you see that they have this balance. In some families, parents are more controlling and that they're more authoritative. And that's when a child will rebel. Whether they are neurodivergent or not, they're going to rebel because you're calling at their human tendency to be free and you're restricting that, right? If then there are parents who are very permissive, just do whatever you want. And that makes a child feel really lost because initially that freedom may feel like, oh, yes, I can do whatever I want. But there are so many different paths that they don't know where do they really fit in. And that can be too much, too overwhelming for a child. So I think having that balance between here are things you can do and here are where the limits are helps help children. It's like, you can drive on the road between the speed limit of 40 to 65, and then there's problems before and, beyond or below that. So just knowing your playing field helps children. And I think, to your point, it's also helpful to educate families, parents, so that they know they have the tools and they have the resources. Many Montessori schools have parent education nights, and we also have a supportive a supportive consultant who works with our parents, and she meets with the parents to discuss their concerns and create a plan for their child.
Yeah, I think it just requires a parent to be open-minded because that's when that shift happens. And it's okay if they're not, right? Because nobody is trained. There's no proper guidebook for being a great parent. People usually pick up that book only when there's a problem. and so and a lot of knowledge is just passed on from families or from the kind of schools that they went to themselves. I think if people are just open, and I think when a child rebels, like what I experienced in my own house, it made me go inwards and question my own parenting, and that opened me up immediately. So I think we should all just be open, and a child has so much to say even though they are little, and irrespective of the age, they're wise beings, and they might not have the ability to speak because they don't have those big words or form sentences, but they're always communicating, and it's our duty as adults to listen to that.
Yeah, I completely agree. Talking about open-mindedness, we also have our own prejudices based on how we grew up, what kind of school we went to, what kind of parenting style our parents had for us, what traditions or cultures we come from. And all of those prejudices can be limiting when it comes to educating our children. And so really saying, we see people who come to our school, they visit our school, and they are really spellbound by the fact that children can work independently. And they say, oh, you may not have any neurodivergent children. And we say, oh, they're right here. Can you spot them? And they can't spot them because they're happy, they are busy, they're working. And, I don't really think being neurodivergent is something new. It's always existed throughout history, throughout human evolution. It's just that what environment are we forcing people into nowadays? We want them to conform all the time. And children can imagine at a much, higher level than they can read or write or do their math or science. To what you said before, Chaya, that children do not have the tools or the words to articulate, but they are thinking and they are imagining big ideas. It's just that they cannot put them on a piece of paper like we do. So if you create activities for them or lessons for them or work for them, that they can bring those ideas into a concrete form that is at their level, then they're satisfied, they're happy, and you don't see them having trouble at school. They're actually very much at peace at school because it's a place where they can be themselves. So I feel it's our prejudice sometimes that stops the development of the students, of the children. And it's in the long term, it's so harmful for humanity because these are the creative souls that could change the world. I mean, take so many creative people in history that have changed the world and have made a big impact. And they were all neurodivergent in some way or the other.
Where would you say that the societal precedent for always ignoring and not listening to children really comes from?
I think it's their size. The children are younger, they're dependent. What do they know? We know it all, right? It's like the adults know more than the children do. So Maria Montessori was truly one of the first educators who said, if you want to work with a child, respect the child. Treat them as an individual, not as a little person. And by respecting them as an individual, then you're saying, all right, the greatness that exists in me also exists in you. It's the same idea of saying namaste in India, right? That I bow to the same spirit that you have, that is in me, that we all are capable of achieving great things. And so when we say to a child, let me listen to what you have to say, they have so much to say. But if we say, oh, it's time to be quiet and sit down and I'm going to read to you or we're going to do math, then you've really stymied their interest or their personality.
How do you then, if a student is not being supported at home, is running up against roadblocks, is facing those difficulties, how can school be an escape for them to get self-advocacy back and grow from an educational standpoint despite being stifled?
Well, that's a very big question, right? Because the home environment is where they spend about 2/3 of their time. The school environment is about where they spend 1/3 of their time. And I think, though, when Maria Montessori started working with children, she was working with children whose parents were working as laborers, day laborers, right? And so they didn't know much about education. And she said, it doesn't matter what they're doing at home. I'm going to teach them here. And while they are here, they're going to get the best of what they can be. And so I think that's a good way to look at education is when we have the children under our care, how do we give them skills to communicate? How can we give them skills to self-regulate? What tools do they need? What tools do they need to take ownership of their own learning? And if we can empower students to articulate their feelings, to be able to ask for help when they need, then they can self-advocate even when they are not in school, in a different environment. And those are the transferable skills. So yes, they have their reading, writing, math, language skills. But in addition to that, they need skills to manage their time, to organize themselves, to communicate, to ask for help, to seek answers. And all of those can be transferred from one environment to another.
I think one thing you mentioned there is like finding organizational skills for the child and finding ways that they can organize and advocate for their own way of doing things, which is very important when it comes to particularly neurodivergent individuals in general, because so often the ways systems have been set up are in opposition for how they may do things, which can be different from neurodivergent kid to neurodivergent kid, of course. You've mentioned previously neurodiversity in your own family. How has what you've seen there helped inform what you brought to the school?
Yeah, my family background was really helpful in understanding children when I started working with children. I come from a large family, so I have about 32 cousins on my father's side and about 12 on my mother's side. So we have a large family, and everybody in like from ages 25 to 5 and all types of children, right? Children who are quick and fast and athletic, and children who take their own time, children who will spend time looking at spiders forever, children who could do art and embroidery, some who were more focused on academics. So we had a wide range of children. And what I found was, like if some of them were in school today, they would be labeled as ADHD or, some label they would have had. And I'm glad they didn't have those labels back then, because they were not stopped. They believed in themselves, and they just did what it took them to be successful. And they're all successful businessmen or businesswomen, or are in professions that fit their personality. And so when I see children now, how has that experience helped me is when I see children in my school now and they present a form of neurodivergent behavior, or I wouldn't say behavior, but neurodivergent aspect. To me, that's okay. This is who this person is. I don't have to put them in any category or box. It's just they learn differently. And what are the tools we are going to make available for them? How are we going to adapt our environment to suit their needs? What accommodations can we make to help this child be more successful? Does this child need more time for tests? Does this child need to sit next to a teacher? Does this child need to repeat instructions back so that we understand that they have understood? Do we meet with the parents more frequently? Do we have a plan for, to measure their progress over time? Do they need extra support in the classroom? All of these become very easy for me to see, because I know that when they are an adult, all of this is going to be behind them. They're going to be successful no matter what. It's not that they would ever not be themselves. They're going to be hyperactive. If they're hyperactive, they're just going to remain, but they're going to find a way to manage their hyperactivity. They are going to find a creative outlet for their big ideas that they have. So while they are under our care, it's our job to give them the environment where they can thrive and not be felt that, oh, I'm not right, or I'm not fitting in somehow.
One of the gifts of ADHD, or just being neurodivergent, is a gift of hyperfocus. Have you seen that play out in your school?
Yeah, and I would say it's a spectrum. It's not one degree of hyper focus, right? You will see that children of a certain age, between 3 to 6, they are very focused on a task that they do. So if they're engrossed in an activity, they're not going to stop. And therefore, children, whether they're neurodivergent or not, you will notice that for a child between the ages of 3 to 6, it's very hard to stop their activity and have them do something else. Now, for students who show hyper-focus activity in their behavior, we see right now we have a summer camp where children are building Lego cars and they are testing them over ramps and tracks and different elements to see how fast and how far can their cars go. And there's one student who has to get it perfect. It has to be just so. And so for this particular student, the amount of time to build the car is longer than the rest of the students. And at some point, the teacher has to give a deadline and say, okay, we're going to stop at this point. So by giving a real deadline and saying, after this, the track will be removed or something, so that they know this is a hard stop. But, they can take a few more minutes than what other students are doing. They don't all have to stop there.
Yeah, that would have been me because when you're into something that's interesting, and even today, I put timers, my alarms are constantly on. But at that age, very young age, probably other than arts, I didn't have an interest in a subject. So definitely zoned out, physically present, mentally somewhere else in a happy place. That was me. So I think hyperfocus is really tied to that interest, their passion, what they enjoy to do, what they love to do. And yes, we need those reminders, that reminder to the frontal lobe, right? This event is going to end. Once you make that connection as to the why, it all sinks in to the child.
Yeah. Can I give you an example of this? What so from sixth grade and up, actually all from 3 years and up, children have projects that they work on. And these projects are truly driven by their interests. So for example, a child may want to research the Arctic fox. All right. So go ahead. The teacher will give them the resources to research that animal. They'll make models. They can go as far as they want. But again, the teacher has, you can work on this for the next half an hour, 20 minutes, or an hour, whatever time the teacher and the student agree upon. And the teacher will say, but remember, you also have to do your spelling and your math and your writing exercise. But why don't you read about the Arctic fox and write a paragraph about it? And that would count as your writing exercise. Now, suddenly writing becomes interesting because it's connected to something that the child wants to do already. And then they not only just write one paragraph, but they go on to write an entire essay about it because they're just so interested, right? The spelling is not very interesting for this child, perhaps, and may lose focus or zone out. But the lessons in a Montessori classroom are one-on-one or in a small group. So they're not 1 in 20 students sitting in front of a chalkboard listening to a teacher, but the teacher's working very closely with hands-on materials for them. So they're engaging their body, they're engaging, they'll give them something to hold. Okay, we are learning about the long vowel sound. Here's snack, here's snake. They can physically hold a card or an object and they can physically see it. So it becomes more engaging for the child to learn even topics that they may not necessarily be interested in. And sometimes during this time, say it's a math activity, it's abstract. They already are zoned out and they're thinking about already, I'm going to do this on the playground or whatever. So the teacher will set a timer. We have these timers that show the time passing across so that the child can actually say, oh, I'm losing time. I've only got so much time. It's a visual clock for them. So that gives them an idea of how much time they have left. And there's always a teacher to help them finish it. Sometimes we do move the child out of the classroom to the library where it's quieter because it just takes them away from the distraction. And then in the library, there's one adult who's just there to help them and get the work done. Sometimes removing them from the environment helps. And it's not punitive. It's more like, hey, there's another space you might like to work in.
All this tells me that the teacher needs to be very observant of what's happening in the classroom and notice all these little details about the child so that they can then recognize that and honor that and work with it, right? So much of personalization and customization is required, which is allowed in a Montessori school. And I'm thinking, why can't all schools be like that?
I agree with you. Why can't they all be like that? But it comes down to this. It's the personalization based on the teacher's observations. So observation is a big part of the Montessori curriculum. Teachers are trained to observe students. So that's part of the Montessori training. Maria Montessori was a physician. She observed everything. She took notes. She wrote it all down. And that's what a typical Montessori teacher will do. For every child in the classroom, the teacher keeps notes about what's working, what's not working. And then at the end of the day, the classroom teachers will tweak their lesson plans and say, I tried this didn't work, tomorrow I'm going to try this. And so they make the plan based on their observations. It's a quick iterative loop, which helps the students and helps the teachers too. And this is also where parental input is helpful, because if parents have seen something at home, we ask them to share those inputs. And it's that partnership that does help.
Talking about how the teachers should be going about this and sort of running the classroom, what challenges have you come up against when it comes to putting together teacher programs and not only teaching the students of a new way, kind of out of the box learning, but teaching the teachers that there is such thing as out of the box teaching and getting them to get more involved in that way?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that the Montessori classroom allows for a lot of possibilities because you can have all kinds of learners in the classroom. But the teacher, Maria Montessori calls it the spiritual preparation of the teacher. It truly is the preparation of the teacher. You have to move your biases out to say, I am here for the child, and truly be able to see every child for who they are. That's not easy. It's not easy. And it does take training. It does take practice. It does take daily reflection on saying, how am I doing today? Where are my students today? And then working on tweaking your program and your curriculum every day. Now, sometimes I've come across teachers who feel that they have to do everything for the child, but then that makes the child handicapped in certain ways because now they're depending on another person. So it's truly the preparation of the teacher. Training, Montessori training is rigorous, and the certification requires, it's a transformation of the teacher themselves, that the teacher has transformed to be able to be ready for this. Usually takes 3 years for a teacher to start their training and be really, truly ready to be able to teach, because it is this internal transformation that has to happen. What are some of the barriers that I have come across is not finding enough teachers that are prepared truly. Also, we are not just a Montessori school, but we also focus on science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, and that's an integrated approach with Montessori. So having teachers be open-minded to learning new ideas. Technology is changing all the time. Sometimes there is a barrier in educators' mindset that including technology is somehow detrimental to the child's learning or to the child's development. And so while hands-on learning is always the best way, you still need to have technology to teach children, or even for children to learn, so that they are able to function in today's world and the world of the future. So I find sometimes finding the right teachers is hard to be able to teach these topics.
Yeah, I can imagine, because it's a mindset, and to bring in that pure mindset needs a lot of inner work. Same thing with the parents, right? Parents and teachers. And I'm thinking with the Montessori system, it goes up till about 8th grade. And now they have this great foundation with great values. And then off they go to this real world where grades and linear thinking all come back, because that's how the real world is, where there is a system, you study linearly, right? And so how can a child who's graduated from your school, from a Montessori system, integrate themselves into this real world?
I'll tell you a story. We had this student, Alex, and when he started with us in kindergarten, he was very shy and very curious. Took him a long time to learn his reading and writing skills. But once he learned to read, he couldn't stop, and he started reading. We have poetry recital every year, and that was something that just caught his imagination. So ever since 1st grade, he's been memorizing classic poems. And by 4th grade, he was writing poems, his own poems. And when he left our school, he went to a local high school. He went to St. John's, actually, in Shrewsbury. And there they had poetry component in their school. And while he struggled to make the grades and do, the regular schoolwork that was required of him, when it came to poetry, he was able to write a poem every day. They were required to write a poem and come to school. And he would write a poem and come to school. And then everybody in the class listened to him. The following few days later or few weeks later, the other classroom teachers started to come to listen to his poems. And soon he was called the Nobel Laureate of St. John's. And so, yes, maybe he doesn't make the grades, and maybe he doesn't have the organization skills that everybody else has. But he has the gift of poetry, which other students don't have. You don't have to be the same. You don't have to fit in all the time. Everybody is not fitting in with you either, right? somewhere we have made it a norm that this is the way everyone should be. And it doesn't have to be that.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be that way. And people who are neurodivergent will have to fight that noise, the
Yeah.
noise of the society,
Yeah.
to fit in. And for that, you need to be really brave. So that child who was great at writing poetry, which came from inside of him, has now to fight this world, because the world is constantly pointing what he's not good at, because that's how the world is built, and the colleges. And so I think being neurodivergent just requires a lot of inner strength.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and that nobody teaches you unless you have a very strong foundation of being comfortable, being who you are. I myself, I'm very grateful for my father, who I thought was unrealistically optimistic. Now I'm so grateful to him because of the words. Words have a lot of power, and those words play out even today after he's passed away. So that strong foundation, where it's coming from, it doesn't matter, but it's really important for a neurodivergent child. It can be from school, neighbors, even a friend, family member, an uncle. It doesn't matter. It must come from somewhere, and they should hold on to that belief, that optimistic belief. It is challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you that it is not an easy journey. Definitely not. For, somewhere students realize that they're thinking differently, or they're approaching the world differently than most of the students in their classroom are. And sometimes they're not getting the social cues that others are getting. And so for this, I do feel that there has to be training. And what I've found is, Mike, you said you are a peer mentor and you work, and I really like that word, that term, because you really have to mentor them and show, here's something that happened. You said this, and in this situation, what would you have said? And maybe later on reflect, because in the moment they may be impulsive in saying something or doing something. So for families, I think to be able to give that support at home is helpful. We've seen a huge difference in children's confidence in the way they carry themselves when they know that they are supported at home as well as at school. And that confidence carries with them through life. So it's truly important. Instead of pointing out mistakes, if we can say, hey, where does this child have talent, and nurture that instead, I think that'll boost their confidence. And we have a student, we've been working with him since 6th grade. He's now in 10th grade. And we've been working on, just his social skills, time management, and executive function skills, right? Organizing. But he's such a creative boy. He has written a story and is ready to publish it. It's, these are the kinds of things that children can achieve, but if we give them time and space to do it, and the belief that they are capable. So yes, this child who could not focus and could not put his thoughts together is now able to sit and write a complete novel, and is working with a publisher to publish it. So I feel that if we just stop thinking about, here is the real world, the real world is everyone in it. The real world is all kinds of people. They've always existed. And, grades have come much later in history. They were not there before. And people functioned, right? People built things, people created things, people were able to make sense of what was around them. But if we just box them in saying you have to do only your schoolwork and be good at grades, that's not life. That's just one aspect of your life. So I feel that often people say to me that, what if they leave Montessori and go to the real world? Montessori is the real world. We teach them to advocate for themselves. We teach them to be confident. We actually show them what they're capable of in like their highest potential, which they don't get that outlet when they leave our school because they are restricted by the curriculum that exists outside.
Right. Yeah. Real world is the world that you create for yourself. I think if they all find that spark that's within them and just hold on to it and then let that lead the way, it will take you to wherever you're supposed to go. And I agree, career is just one aspect. And so let's not just go crazy over just that one element. Because if you are sacrificing other parts of your life, it's not worth it, because we are all integrated. And yeah, so, but it's all in that finding that authentic self and honoring it and learning and growing, because who's perfect? That word should be banned. And we are all here to evolve. Even the school topper, everybody is here to evolve, and that's life.
Yeah, I think everybody is here to evolve. And in fact, in Montessori, the teachers will say, okay, you are working on your comprehension level C, and somebody else is working on comprehension level A, but they're working on math level C, and you're working on math level B. And they are excellent in art, and you are learning the basics of art. So, we can't just compare by one element, that everybody has something unique in each of them. And that's what educators should look for. What is the spark in every child? And can we get that spark to light on fire and take it, run with that? I think that's what education needs.
Yeah, there's only one of everybody. There's no normative, there's no actual things you have to understand, have to learn, have to be good at, that isn't necessarily arbitrary, made up by certain types of people who decide to set rules mostly to put people like them first. We don't nurture creativity. We don't nurture all types, and tend to demonize those. Why do we portray mechanics as dirty lowlifes? We need mechanics. We need people to be able to do that. Why is that seen as lesser than necessarily a mathematician, when really it's kind of very similar at the end of the day? But that's what we do. We don't nurture those things. We don't tell people, we don't tell kids that when we say you can be anything you want to be, it's really everything that is deemed acceptable from some standard that has been grandfathered in over decades at this point. And we stifle them because of it. So as we wrap up, what would you say is the future of education if it stays on a path of actual nurturement of child's intellect and their personal abilities?
I think, now we have so many more options for educating children. We are not just limited by the traditional schools. There are Montessori schools, Waldorf schools. There's online learning. You can homeschool. I think if parents really take the interest and are involved in their child's learning, then the child is in a good place. With educators, I would say that if they look at the child and not the politics, not what's a fashionable item on social media, and just stick to the child's needs in their developmental stages, not bring adult issues to the children's lives, I think the child is in a good place. Allow them to just be children. Let them have a childhood.
I also want to just mention one thing about creativity. My favorite topic is creativity starts in its own way. It can look weird, and it could look so different. And so it's so important, especially for a child who's creative, to not judge it and to just allow that to nurture and to grow and blossom in its own way and it's in its own timeline, because these children are very sensitive and they could stop doing what they're doing if we start judging them. And so give that time, and it's okay if you don't understand it. As an adult, you don't get it. It's fine. It's not meant for us to understand. And as long as they're not harming themselves, doing something bad to themselves or to the world, just let them be, because that's how creativity happens. It could be a thought, it could be something they physically do. Just that freedom is really required.
Yeah, I think the people who judge creative creations should first create themselves, then they'll know the process. Sometimes they're not spending time creating, and so they don't know how messy it can be or how it has to take its turns to get to the point that it has to get to. And so, I think parents, teachers should engage in building, in art, in creating things with the students, experience it firsthand. And I'll tell you today, as I said, we have the summer camp where they're making Lego cars and they're racing them. There are about 20 students. Not one car is like the other. There are small, big cars. There are cars that have a windshield, cars that have no roofs. And yet every car is unique and beautiful in its own way because the child has put in that effort. And whether it goes on the track or the ramp, they will test it for themselves. And if it fails, they'll know the result of that. And if they'll fix it. Children don't give up. They want to do the best thing. But as soon as the adult makes a judgment on it, they stop and they say, I'm done. It's not theirs anymore. The adult has intervened their sacred space. So I think for creativity, you have to be creative yourself before you judge it.
Beautifully said.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. And where can everyone find more information on you and the school?
So you can look at our website, www.tecschools.com. And we are based in Worcester. We are located on 15 Jamesbury Drive in Worcester. We welcome everyone to come see our school and get in touch with us.
And this is in Massachusetts, in the US.
In Massachusetts.
We have listeners from all over the world.
Sorry. Yes, we are in Massachusetts. And you can email me at rsharma@tecschools.com.
So I'll include all that in the show notes, which can be found, of course, at sparklaunchpodcast.com and wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you so much. I've had a lot of fun talking to you both.
This episode was brought to you by Sparkade, our ADHD game-based learning platform designed to spark focus, confidence, and joy through play. Join the waitlist today at play.sparkade.app/waitlist. That's play.sparkade.app.